But if they say, but I don't believe black people are human, what do you say to that?
Well,
Number 2, the racist might just say that he wants to live a selfish life and doesn't care about what can be better for humanity and still even be right according to this worldview.
But I'm sorry, just because you don't like a reality doesn't make it not real. And so if there are if there are no objective morals, then unfortunately what Joseph Stalin did in the USSR was not objectively wrong. But that's not a shocking thing to say if we're under the assumption that nothing is objectively wrong.
Do you understand? Is it a problem for you then, telling people what they ought to do? Because there's a sense in which, you know, if you see a society being racist or treating women unequally or whatever it might be.
Or Catholic priests abusing children like you do on your website, you say that's wrong?
For me, the problem has always been, for the atheist who denies objective morality, is what right do you have to tell someone else? Because they're just acting according to their subjective preferences.
Well, the subjective preferences, I find, in these cases, we often agree. So, for instance, if I meet a member of the Ku Klux Klan, we can find common ground in the sense that I might say, okay, so why is this wrong? Why is that wrong? Why? Until we get to the final point and they say, well, I think that it's because my worldview is better for humanity. And I say, well, hang on, so do I. I think my worldview is better for humanity. So let's go on the assumption that what we want is to get what's best for humanity. And here's how I think my worldview leads to that. So even people...
but if they say, but I don't believe black people are human... What do you say to that?
Well, that's the thing. Then the discussion doesn't become. Then the discussion becomes trying to prove how they are.
Right.
You sort of remove the need for a basis once you find out what the basis of their beliefs are. Once you find that common ground.
Here is an explanation of the lacking of ground the atheist faces. First, on what ground can he tell the racists that they are wrong if everything he comes with ends up being seen as his own preference or opinion? The racist could simply respond by saying, I have a different preference or opinion. The atheist isn't in a position where he can tell people what is absolutely right or wrong since, according to himself, everything is everyone's preference. Therefore, there is no moral obligation for the people he is trying to convince to execute what, according to this worldview, they think it is his personal bias. And even in a context where he tries in a relative world to find common ground with the racists by arguing which one of their worldviews could be better for human flourishing, he still faces challenges like, number 1, the racist can disagree that black people are human or intrinsically equal to other races. Number 2, the racist might just say that he wants to live a selfish life and doesn't care about what can be better for humanity and still even be right according to this worldview. So there is a huge issue concerning what ground the atheist has to compel people to adopt what he thinks can be better for humanity.
Would you say racism has always been wrong, was wrong in every culture, time and place where it was practiced in the past? Or can you not actually say that if you're a subjectivist?
I would say if we're assuming that human prosperity is a good thing, and by good we mean best for human prosperity, then yes, racism has always been wrong. Yes,
right,
but only on that assumption.
Yes,
which
of
is
course.
An assumption
for the racist,
which is an assumption we all share. Maybe not the racist.
Yeah.
In fact, no. The racist does share the assumption that human prosperity is a good thing.
They may not. They may think my own prosperity is the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to live a selfish life that disregards other people's preferences.
But if we did have a racist,
but the problem is, how do you? Again, all I'm saying is, and I think you're agreeing with me, is simply that there's no objective way of sorting between these different preferences people have. There's no actual sort of thing that says this is the correct way. We should all be, wanting this human flourishing.
It's a harsh reality. I don't like.
There's no way of grounding
it can make me uncomfortable. The idea that there is no objective, as far as I'm concerned.
And so, do you understand Frank's view here, which is he sees that as such an obvious thing that you would have to the premises against that, if you like, would have to be much, much stronger than they are to take away his instinctive view that this is really actually an objective reality.
I understand entirely.
As you heard the host saying, it will take a premise stronger than the opinion of another, which in this case is human flourishing, because they believe their own flourishing is above everything, so making it equally valid to the other person argument. That's why I said in the previous section that they suffer from a lack of grounding. They need a premise stronger than what they propose, and unfortunately it has been a burden that the atheist has never been able to sustain. That's why it seems obvious for most people that if a God is the best grounding for morality,
I kind of had this interesting conversation in my very first encounter with Richard Dawkins, and I asked him why, whether if all our morality is essentially a product of undirected evolution, whether he can really say that rape is wrong. And he says, well, I do believe rape is wrong. Now, that may be a product of my evolutionary past, but that's a value judgment I'm going to make. And I said, but how do you make that value judgment? You have to step outside of this evolutionary process to say that's wrong. And he said, well, maybe, but it doesn't show that anything supernatural exists. And I said, but as far as you're concerned, the fact that we've believed rape is wrong is as arbitrary as the fact we've evolved 5 fingers rather than 6. And he said, yes. Basically. And I agree on naturalism, that is true, but most people recoil at that idea that our morality is essentially arbitrary.
But in the same sense, this is what frustrates me about atheists a lot, is they'll do the same thing but the opposite. They'll look at God and they'll think of the evil. They'll listen to Hitchens talk about some celestial North Korea and they'll recoil at that and they'll say, that's a horrible thing, I can't imagine that reality. But I'm sorry, just because you don't like a reality doesn't make it not real. And so if there are no objective morals, then unfortunately what Joseph Stalin did in the USSR was not objectively wrong. But that's not a shocking thing to say if we're under the assumption that nothing is objectively wrong.
Do you understand then why for many people the moral argument is so powerful?
Absolutely.
Because they cannot get themselves to a point of view where those kinds of acts are only really about people's preferences.
The culminating point is that he finally admitted the harsh reality that if it is true that there is no objective morale, then even the most horrible crime is not really wrong. The horrible conclusion from this worldview is that they logically cannot be disgusted by the worst of crimes because they are not really bad, but just a different taste of choice for other people. That is why many people think it is more reasonable to reject the atheist idea of moral relativism and accept the idea of God and morale absolute. That is why I am not an atheist, but a Christian theist. God is real, and if you don't know him, it is time for you to know Jesus Christ and be saved.